Welcome to the Craft to Career podcast with Elizabeth Chappell, where every week we dive into how you can turn your craft into a successful career. Get ready to have the career you've always dreamed of.
Welcome to episode 92 of the Craft to Career podcast. I am Elizabeth Chappell of Quilters Candy, the host of the show, and this week I am inviting back and super excited to have Jemima Flendt of Tied with a Ribbon. She was on the podcast a while back. We did a coaching session, and I actually really love this. She reached out to me and was like, can I come back on? I want to share how things went. And of course, I love to have people back on to hear how they implemented the things that we talked about and how that has worked for them. And there was some I just really love chatting with Jemima. She is super talented. She is going places. She has gone places and will continue to. And it was just really great to chat with her. I loved how she is a go-getter. And so I'm excited for you to hear all that's happened, the things that she implemented and how she had to pivot because one of them wasn't working. So let's dive in. Before that, I'm going to share the Apple Podcast review for this week. It comes from Susanna_makes. And Susanna says, this show is what the quilt world needs more of. Elizabeth provides great insight into the business of the quilt world. Too many in the quilt world avoid these topics. However, they are vital to the success of the industry. Professionals and want-to-be professionals alike should take a listen. That is so sweet. Thank you, Susanna. I do love talking about all the topics, and I do really believe that too, that the success of the industry depends on being open and transparent, learning what's working, what's not working, what we can charge, what we should do for free, all the things. So thank you. I really appreciate that. If you're listening and you have not left a review, I would love for you to leave a review. I've noticed there are also a lot of reviews on Spotify, which that you can just leave a star review, but I still really appreciate it. So thank you to you listeners for leaving reviews. And now let me jump in and let's chat with Jemima. All right, super excited to have Jemima here. We had her on the podcast a while back. I'll have to look and see when that was. But it was a coaching call, and we had made some goals and talked about her business and growth. And so this is the follow-up to see how things have gone. So Jemima, welcome. Welcome back. I'd love to hear a recap, of how things are going.
Yeah, it's thanks for having me again, Liz. It's been a very busy, I think it's just over sort of 6 months since we last chatted, and it's definitely been busy in terms of having those goals and working towards getting those ticked off. So yeah, really excited.
Yeah, awesome. And so we have kind of been in touch since via email through We Talked Last, and you have some really big things coming up. One of which, but I want to start with, is email marketing. The reason I want to talk about that is because I'm very pleased with how you move forward with it. So I had a suggestion for you of be a guest on a blog. And so I want you to talk about how that went. But the thing I'm so pleased with is your determination to I will figure out something that's going to work. That's what it takes to succeed. Things are always pivoting and changing. So let's dive in. And can you share about growing your email list?
Yeah, of course. Well, when we last chatted, we were talking about some of the ways that I could really help to push that needle forward on my email list, because I felt that I'd come to a point where I was really just at a standstill and couldn't grow it anymore organically, and looking at those ways that we could, ideas and suggestions really to help grow that. And one of those that you had mentioned was your success that you'd had with reaching out to bloggers and putting forward your name and your details and what you like to do and how you could actually work collaboratively with those. So So that's kind of where I started off the back of your suggestion. Didn't quite go to plan, I have to say.
I am so curious to hear details. What happened? And you don't need to say names or anything, but what happened?
Well, I kind of, I put together a bit of an email. I put together an idea of who I wanted to approach and who I wanted to talk to. And as I started chatting, and not even chatting, sending those emails and talking to those people, I kind of realised that this wasn't really going to work out the way that I had thought it would, look all, sparkly and glittery. It really just, the doors didn't open in that direction at all.
How did it look? Were they like, no, I'm not accepting that, or I'm not interested?
It was definitely mostly a case of they had very certain ways that they approached their blogging now as to what they wanted, and things needed to fit in certain categories, and I wasn't necessarily fitting into their specific categories for what they were doing. And I guess that's, as things move and evolve with time, those are things that they've put into process for their blogs. So,
and can I ask, is it topics, or is it I don't want to have guests who have a free opt-in on my blog?
Definitely there wasn't the option to have that ability, that necessarily that connection to their audience. And definitely they had certain parameters around what they wanted you to deliver and what that looked like. Certainly more in terms of what they did and how I could do things that were already theirs, or those sorts of things.
So promote them, nothing about you.
I guess, yeah. So I guess more just in me putting my name to having done something, and that was the promotion side of them, allowing me to come and write for them. So, and at that point I kind of realised that just wasn't what I was looking for, and wasn't what I was hoping for. So, yeah.
How many people did you reach out to, out of curiosity? I'm curious how big of a trend this is.
I probably reached out to 3 or 4, and by the time I was sort of getting the same response, I started to have to rethink how I was going to approach that type of collaboration. So, but in saying that,
real quick though, that is what I am so proud of, is that you pivoted and you're not like, oh well, I can't do it, there goes that, I'm gonna throw in the towel. You are scrappy. You like, okay, I need to do something else. So I'm so curious to hear what you did.
Yeah, well, there were a couple of options for moving forward with that type of blog promotion, and those are things that I've got in the works for things coming out this year. So not all doors to that were closed, but the majority of the ones that I thought would be great leads, or even that I had previously sort of had some contact with, those ones sort of didn't come through. So it was about just realising that I had to rethink this process of how was I going to continue to grow this email list without necessarily at this stage, because I'd also looked into the Facebook marketing. So without throwing heaps of money at it at this stage, how could I continue to grow that? So, and that's where I guess I've always just had this determination in what I do, in that it's not about waiting for a door necessarily to be opened. It's about knocking on that door and introducing yourself, and walking in and trying to make that connection with people so that they can see what you do. And in doing that, I also then started to look around on Instagram as to what was happening, what was that new trend of collaborative email marketing. And then I started to really realise what that new trend sort of seemed to be.
So can you speak to that? I have my suspicions of what it is, but what is this new trend that you speak of?
Definitely the approach of collaborative designers coming together and working on projects and patterns and bundle deals and all those sorts of things. So, and I sort of quickly realised that this was something that people were starting to do. I'd seen a few here in Australia, I'd seen a few sort of overseas, and I started asking questions because I didn't know how to get necessarily into the doors of those types of events. So, I certainly started knocking on some doors and asking questions from my Insta friends and my quilty mates as to, how did you get on these lists? Where do you sort of find these leads? And because I just had no idea.
So have you participated in one? And I will say I had major FOMO because I saw a group of people doing one of those and I wasn't. And then I heard how successful it was in growing their list at the end. I'm like, dang it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to start my own. I'm going to gather my own group and put this together. So it will be coming out later this year. Keep an eye. And the topic is very different from what's been out there. But how did you then move forward with that?
Yeah, so once I started investigating a bit further and working out sort of how this was sort of a way that people were putting together, ideas and projects and getting them out to people, I started to message some people and find my way through to people who were organising those events and essentially putting up my hand really to say I'd love to be involved and this is what I do. And if there's room, if there's spots, then definitely I was keen.
And did you get a spot? Are you going to be in one or have you been in one?
Yeah, so I actually did two just the other side of last year or just before sort of Christmas. So I was actually involved in two different events. Which was, there's certainly a lot to learn from being part of these event style collaborations, and definitely I've learned a lot about my email list and especially how to grow that and how to things that I just didn't even consider beforehand as to what that needs to look like.
So tell us. I am like, ooh, what have you learned? I must know.
I think mostly, well, first of all, I think I learned that everyone's email provider works very differently. And I was sort of running into a few roadblocks with my particular email provider as to, being able to upload lists and that sort of thing. So, and definitely in terms of speaking to the quality of the list, I've definitely learned how it's just not it's not a numbers game in terms of your list and who you're sending those emails to.
So what do you mean by that?
Because everyone's very happy to sort of, they love all the things that go with it, but then you've also got this, in terms of your email list, you've actually got to work out how you're going to convert those followers into your own audience. So you've got people who haven't necessarily come across you before, don't know what you do, and then you're going to be emailing them, telling them all about yourself and what you do and what you offer, but they don't necessarily know about you or have come across you before in that way. So it's really about learning how to convert that email list into followers who do love what you do and who are keen to be on your list, and especially to open those emails, because it doesn't matter how many emails are landing in inboxes. If they're not getting opened, then you're paying to have them on your list.
Who's your email provider?
I've been with MailChimp.
Okay. And are you happy with it? It sounds like there's been a bit of a hiccup uploading people or lists.
We have had, there has been a hiccup, only in terms of their rules and the way that they like you to do that. They have very clear guidelines on what they do, and I just I hadn't done an event like this before either, so they were things that I wasn't really sort of, and I should have known or should have done some investigating a bit earlier in terms of how I was going to then do that. So
Go ahead. Sorry.
No, I just kind of assumed it was as easy as it looked. Really.
Have you looked at Flowdesk?
I've looked at a couple of other email providers, and definitely in terms of going forward, that's something that I've got to have a good look at, because MailChimp for me originally in the beginning was such a great option because you could have quite a big list without having to pay for it. And initially, back when I started my list, that was great. And then years down the track, as you develop all these links and everything is linked back to that one, all those landing pages and everything like that, everything starts to become a little bit more complicated than just switching over and changing over one button. But definitely come to that point where moving forward, I'm in the mindset where I'm ready to look at, making those changes.
You know what? I think I actually might do a little training on Flowdesk because I used to have MailChimp and it really sucks to be penalized for growing your list. Where like, oh, now I have to pay more. You want to feel excited about growing your list. Anyhow, there's a lot to that, but that's a topic for another day.
Yeah, and that's the thing, if you're paying, substantial amounts because you want those emails to be delivered, but you can't, they're also then saying, well, you can't, where are these emails from and how did you get them? And then stopping you from sending out emails, then it's really, it's not going to work in your favour.
Yeah.
You're just paying for something that you're not getting.
Interesting. I didn't know they had that. Because I also use Kajabi, where I've grown, I import my email list on both. And Kajabi, the hiccup with that is you can only upload like 50 people at a time or something. So when you have a list of thousands of people, it really sucks to like, okay, copy and paste these 50 and then this and this. Whereas in Flowdesk, you can just upload unlimited, but each one has their pros and cons. But Flowdesk, it's capped. You only pay so much a month for life, and it's under $100 a month, no matter how big. But anyhow, that's a topic for another day, like I said.
But definitely in terms of, it's such a great way to reach a new audience. So it's, definitely in terms of growing new leads and trying to build that audience going forward. As I said, it has been successful in terms of, I've been able to triple my list.
Okay, yeah, let's talk numbers. So you tripled your list by being a part of these groups where you're offering something in exchange for an email.
That's right.
And I also want to speak about, because I always hear from people like, oh my gosh, I had people unsubscribe every time I send an email. I'm like, yes, you will. So can you speak to that?
Well, that's also where I run into some trouble because when you have, in MailChimp, when you have a large number of people unsubscribe, you get flagged. So these are the types of things that because I hadn't done this type of thing before, I hadn't come across any of this before. So that was just the things that I've really learnt in terms of, being able to grow that list, but also what you can and can't do within that, because as I said, it wasn't something that I'd come across or done before.
So what does MailChimp tell you percentage-wise what your unsubscribe is per email?
It gives you the numbers of unsubscribes per email, and then what it does is there are percentages based on your particular industry that it will say if it's higher than this or if it's more than this, that's above industry standards. So you must be sending spam or you must be sending to accounts who haven't signed up or that type of thing to have that number of subscribes. So it's been learning things like, having a double opt-in for those particular, people coming into the list. So look, I've learned so much in not only working with the events and being able to do that side of things, but also in terms of how to make those work for me, and as I said before, just that total, you want your emails to be open. So when you're sending them, you want people to be reading what you're sending. You want it to be informative. You want it to be relevant, because having that large number on your list doesn't mean anything when you just continually have that unsubscribe rate.
Yeah. Well, and things that really kind of hurt to do, but help your email list. Go in, and if there's anyone who's bouncing or not opening your emails, delete them off your list, because that will up your open rate. But I'm going to share some numbers here. Tell me if this sounds similar-ish to, okay. So I sent an email to about 40,000 people about 20,000 opened it. So it was a 47.5% open rate. There were 261 people who unsubscribed, 6 bounces. So that means I need to clean those emails out. And then 8 people who marked it as spam. And I know I can go in and look and see who those people are, and I don't because I'm like, curses, you know? But does that sound about similar to what you have going on?
Yeah. So in my open rate, I'm sitting at about 60% on my open rate.
Nice. That's great. That's phenomenal.
So, which I'm really happy with. And I've been working with a VA as well
We need to chat about that.
last year because I needed help in being able to work on my MailChimp, and I knew that was one area that I needed to grow. So that was really kind of, I decided rather than putting my money into Facebook marketing, like we had chatted about, I actually decided to put my money into a VA who's helped me really grow that back end of that, and who can really give me, you know, the actual great information sometimes in converting that email and helping those and looking at all those numbers and making sure we're looking at what's going out and doing that. So that's where I, instead of investing in Facebook ads, I decided to invest in someone to come on board to help me with that.
So tell me everything. We have got to dive deep into this. I'm very intrigued. First of all, how did you find the VA?
I had actually been working with a VA last year, and then that was kind of just, I would send everything that I was sending out in the newsletter, I would send it to her, and she would just upload that. So that was basically just her role. And at that point, when I decided I needed someone to look into being a VA who actually sort of offered some sort of marketing background or some sort of had that experience and knowledge in making that list grow, I was chatting to a friend of mine, and we were chatting about, you know, what I was trying to do and how I was frustrated with, you know, trying to do all these things but hadn't sort of really gotten anywhere yet. And at that point, they then sort of suggested that they were looking at doing that area within, you know, their business on sort of a more bigger scale than what they had been doing. And I've been working with her. So, and it's definitely been beneficial. You know, she's great in terms of, you know, letting me know where things are improving and, you know, on the numbers and what we can do to sort of help push things, or what, you know, what we can do and all those sorts of things.
So does she look at like the open rate, or this unsubscribe was really high here, let's look at what's going on, or what does she do?
She's really intrigued and really is into all the marketing best practices, and really sort of has done a lot of homework and background work on, you know, what works within the craft industry, and she's done her homework in terms of, you know, knowing sort of the industry. She also, you know, has a background in this industry as well. So when I sort of talk about quilts and that type of thing, it's so nice to have someone who understands and who can change out words, because she knows that that's a better word to sell something, or that's a better word to describe what we're trying to do. So that's also been really helpful, because her background knowledge in the industry has, really helped that.
So, okay. And then I am curious to talk about Facebook ads, because, okay, let me explain how this all ties in. So I just opened up the Craft to Career Club, and I did some video of where I shared with the members in the club how much I've earned every year, revenue and profit, since I started my business. And I want to say it was 2021 that my revenue doubled, but my profit dipped from the year before. And that was the first year that I hired a CPA. And so I was like, what happened that year? Like, as I'm looking back, what in the world? That was the year that I hired and paid for Facebook ads, and paid way too much. I was not getting a return on that. Now, fast forward to 2022, I still did Facebook ads. My profit and revenue jumped immensely, but the way I did the Facebook ads was very different. I spent way less on it. It was way more strategic. So I feel like I need to speak on that at some point. But how did you decide to not do the Facebook ads? And I will say the company that I recommended, they're great for short-term launches. They're not good at the marketing. You have to approach them with only hire them for a couple months, and you need to have the marketing plan to start. They are not the brains. They just execute what you want. And that was my mistake.
Yeah, I think that's exactly where I landed in the end, in that it was new for me, it was new for my business, and someone really, at the end of the day, didn't have the knowledge to help me for what to put together. It was, you know, we can do the ad or we can do this, and honestly, the cost was, you know, and it was out of my budget. Because at the time I didn't have enough to put back into the business to be able to, you know, or at the time, you know, that's not where I wanted to put my money, and that's when I decided that there had to be another way to make what I had work.
Which I will give a shout out, and I'm like, this is so not me. She's so great. I'm just going to share her. But then there's this bit of like, but I hope there's still enough for me. So that's not how I show up. That's not Elizabeth. There's enough for all of us. Michelle Fernandez, she offers a course on how to run Facebook ads that's phenomenal. You buy it once, you have access for life, because the last course I bought, you only had access for a year. And I hate that because I'm like, I need to come back forever and ever, you know? And then she's who I used in 2022. And she helped me. I then hired her for 4 weeks right before my launch and during my launch. And she helped me with strategy. She helped me do the things for a much cheaper cost. And that's when, but I also had a launch strategy. But that growth was out of this world. So I do recommend Michelle Fernandez. If anything, if nothing else, her course that she offers, where it's a one-time payment of, it's affordable for what you get. So there's that. But yeah, I think you made a smart move there.
It was definitely, you know, it's on my radar, but it's just one of those things at the end of the day, with the other things that I was working on at the end of last year and what I've got going into this year, I literally had to pick and choose what I was going to put my energy into, what was I going to put my money behind, and back those. And I just realised that at the end of the day, there just wasn't enough room. There wasn't enough of me to go around, essentially, to be able to do even more things that at that stage I couldn't say we're going to bring in a return. So,
well, and Facebook ads are not a good strategy until certain things are in store or you have the right thing to put your money behind. And again, that's a topic for another day, but I am very impressed with your business savvy of being able to filter out, I shouldn't do this. Let's focus on this. That is a huge skill set that I feel like has really served you well. But I would love to touch on other things that you've done since the last time we talked and what's coming up and happened.
Yeah, well, it's certainly, it's been so busy since we last chatted, because basically off the back of us chatting last year, I also really took away from our chat, and I sat down, and one of the biggest takeaways from you and I talking last time was on your statement about owning my own credibility, and that just kept playing over and over in my mind for what did I want the rest of, you know, the year to look like, what was I going to work on, what did I need to do in my business to move things forward. And out of what we had talked about, you had definitely suggested the online courses, and that was something at that stage I hadn't entered into, I was thinking about, but at that stage wasn't on my radar. And then basically after chatting with you and just that sentence of owning your own credibility, I knew straight away then what I was going to do in terms of getting an online course, and it just lit that fire under me to be able to go, right, I'm a teacher. That's just, it's who I am, it's what I do, and how to
I just gave a cheers. You guys can't see us, but I'm like cheering her.
how to own that as an online course, because a lot of things, you know, there are a lot of things that you can teach and do and all that, but it always just kept coming back to me and my just that need of always, and loving most in this quilting world is getting to share and getting to teach and getting to show others. And one of my biggest elements of that is definitely with beginner quilters. And that, as a high school home economics teacher, I've taught beginner, sewists and, kids, cooking and hospitality and tourism and all those things. And just that beginner element and teaching just really made me realise that getting an online course for beginners was absolutely going to be my goal for last year. And we're there.
Many things to say on this. So first of all, remind me to ask you about the Craftsy thing. So that's one of the things. Second of all, I love that you're leaning into the thing that you love. And I've seen other people who are like, well, I see that people are growing because they're offering these courses, so I should offer this course, even though that's not what they love to do. So everyone, find what you love, even if someone else is doing that thing, or even, especially if someone's not, and do what you love and what you're good at. And especially if you're like, this is too easy, no one is even going to need this, it's so obvious. It's not to everyone. What comes easy to you isn't easy for everyone. And then, okay, to the Craftsy thing, you have some very cool experience with this. I remember years ago, you were flown to Denver and you recorded, it was Classy or Blue, whatever. It's gone through, I don't even know if it's around anymore.
Golden Peak Media, yeah.
Okay, yeah. So you have done this, like you've been hired and you've made video tutorials. How was that? I'm so intrigued what that was like.
That experience was just absolutely not only the scariest thing I've probably ever done, but just absolutely so exciting. And so I absolutely just was thrilled to be able to go and do that. That was off the back of my first book, Weekend Quilting, and getting to show that and just learning production crew and filming, and I was getting hair and makeup done every day.
Right.
And
I saw that and was like, I want that. I want to be like on behind the camera with someone doing my hair and makeup.
And just learning how to talk and pausing when you do make mistakes, and learning how to get across what you need to do. But it was an amazing experience to be able to get out there and do that. And I think I just didn't. It's funny because even though I've done that before, when it came to sort of putting together everything, and I know I do reels and all that, I do all that sort of stuff already on Instagram, putting it into what is going to be my own course is just a completely different element, because you've got to build a back end of a website and sales pages and checkout pages and drip flow emails and automations, and so learning all of that. But definitely in terms of hoping to that experience that I've had, and I love it. I just getting to do that sort of filming. I think because being a teacher, it's just getting up and talking in front of an audience has never bothered me. I do get nervous, absolutely, and
right.
I get so excited by being able to share what I do and inspire others to become involved in our industry, in craft and making things for themselves and making their first quilt. And definitely in terms, I want to do more. I can't wait to to be able to do some more.
And it's interesting. I'm very much, if I'm gonna record videos and stuff, I want to own that for myself. Like I want to own the rights to it and earn all of the income from that. But never say never, because I know there's some great exposure and some benefits that come from going on someone else's platform. There's always pros and cons. Is that video that you did, is it still available? And has it in the past or now, does it help grow your audience and have people get aware of who you are?
No. Back in 2018 was when we filmed it, and it went out to an audience. It was done for like a set launch, and that was great. And it also then was, as I said before, it was helping promote Weekend Quilting, which was my first book, which I then also took to market. So that was, I think that's almost where we probably first met up as well. So
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, and being able to do that, I think it was the experience at that time too, if you think back to then, the platforms that we know exist now didn't, people weren't doing,
Right.
know, online, filming and, reels, all that type of video content didn't exist, and certainly in terms of, whilst I was, on Instagram back then, it was certainly very different to how to how it's promoted and what you need to do to be able to, get in front of your audience now. So experience, I would have to say, absolutely experience. And also at the time, it was a big deal.
It was. I was like, my gosh, that's amazing. So it's not still available. No one can go and it was it only a limited time that it was.
Yeah,
ever?
and a couple of
Okay.
times it has sort of gone. I've had information to say that it was back up. Honestly, I'd have to actually go and have another look because sometimes it gets taken down, sometimes it comes back up.
Do you get royalties if it comes back up? Do you get paid, or
Yes.
they own that?
Yeah, that's still
Interesting. So when does your course come out, and what are you teaching? And who's your platform? I'm very curious.
So I've gone with New Zenler, which is
I've
one
heard that.
that there were quite a number of other Aussies here using that platform. So essentially I could see what they were doing. I've probably asked them way too many questions, but
Good for you.
they've been, my friends who have been here in Oz have been, so great with that, who already have that platform. But coming out on February 3rd is New Quilt on the Block, which is my
I like it.
which is my step-by-step online beginners quilt course.
And what will you be covering in the course?
So this is very much for someone who hasn't made a quilt as yet. They're keen to start in the new year. Also those people who have been trying to piece together all that free content and try and sort of get, watch this bit of video for this, and or also, just those people who are so keen, they've seen all those beautiful Pinterest photos, but the results that they're getting just aren't anything like what they're wanting. So online for people so that my audience can be reached worldwide, because I do have a lot of people through Instagram and that who come from Canada and from the US and over in Europe. So that was also a big thing in terms of really being able to take what I do and owning that beginner element and knowing that that's really where I sit in terms of the gold that I can bring to a course, and taking people right from the get-go, knowing what tools to get, what equipment, what does their sewing machine need to look like in terms of if they've only been sewing on it, how do they, actually quilt on it, which, having a sewing machine for, dressmaking is very different to having a sewing machine, work for you in terms of quilting. So taking them right through making their first quilt with all very much looking at all the things along the way that sometimes are forgotten or sometimes aren't necessarily told to you, like how and which way to press seams and why we press them in particular directions, or particular pinning techniques that actually will help make a difference with how your end product actually looks. So I've really sort of tried to I did a lot of research, and with my background experience in teaching a lot of beginners, I kind of knew where those big holes were in people learning for themselves, and really those were my major I wrote those down first. So the areas that I knew beginner quilters really struggled with, that's where I started, and that's where the pattern came from as well. It wasn't just a case of I've designed a quilt and here's a course. The actual course was structured from the beginning, and the actual design was structured to actually showcase and to build those foundational skills for quilters.
I wrote the pattern first and then made a course, but you wrote the course and made a pattern with the beginner in mind, which I have to say, from your first book, I learned something from you that has stuck with me, and I still think of you every time I do it. You talked about when you sew a piece together that you should press the iron on those stitches before you press the seams. It seals it. And I learned that from you, and I really picture your face every time I do that. Or if I don't do it, I'm like, oh, sorry, Jemima.
No, I love it. And that's, honestly, I was just recently on a teaching trip in New Zealand, and I had a student who was struggling in the class, and I actually sat down at her machine, and I was just I'd seen what she was doing, and I was like, this, she wasn't happy with how it was coming together, and she just couldn't work out why it wasn't coming together. And I literally sat down and we looked at what was going on, and she didn't have a 1/4-inch foot. And no one had ever told her. She said she'd been doing lessons for ages.
Wow.
She'd been doing them in a patchwork, in a quilting store, but no one had ever actually looked at her foot that she was sewing with. And that's exactly why her pieces weren't coming together. It wasn't that she wasn't great at sewing, and this is where people fall in that hole. It's not, they lose that momentum because it's not necessarily them. Sometimes it's those other elements that, or your equipment or your tools that you think are the right thing, but you don't necessarily know, the foot that your machine comes with isn't actually, great for quilting.
Yeah. Well, and I call it a battleground, but kind of. You've been on the battleground. You've been with those people who are frustrated and not getting results. And I can see some great reels here where you're like scrolling through and you see this amazing thing on Pinterest, and then you pull up yours and it's like wonky and terrible. There's some fun marketing you can do here.
I recently, a couple of weeks ago, because I'm getting busy promoting New Quilt on the Block with the doors opening soon, I actually have my first quilt, and I've taken some of the promo photos have been taken with that first quilt, and whilst there are so many holes that I could pick in that first quilt, the story isn't actually about what's necessarily wrong with it. It's just that was what I knew at the time, and that was, but most importantly, that was the beginning of I didn't understand when I made that first quilt that I would be here now, and that is where it would take me, and how many people I would wrap up in quilts, and how many gifts I would give, and how many things. I just didn't realize how that one piece of fabric would actually change the course of the course of my life.
That actually gives me goosebumps. That's really beautiful. I love that. Like, people, you just never know where this will bring you.
That's right. And just, that feeling that beginners can have, and that success, and being so proud of taking their first quilt and gifting it to someone, and absolutely wrapping up those people who are most important to them, and just feeling like they've actually achieved something that they're proud of, and wanting to do more. That's our biggest thing in quilting, and in terms of, a lot of what I teach. It's, you're going to have, if you've got people who are having success in what they're doing, then that spurs them on to want to do more. It makes them want to pick up their next quilt pattern, where if they've spent more time unpicking, or if they've spent more time, worried about every little seam coming together, then, we want people quilting. And, sometimes, it's those things that I've really tried to sort of look at in the course, and really try to make people sort of accomplish something that I know that they can do.
And it's interesting because I grew up with my mom sewing and quilting, and I had some pretty rough experiences. The sewing machine wasn't great. The thread would get all terrible, and then I took a sewing class in high school. I wish I had saved what I made. It was so bad. But I just kind of wrote off sewing and quilting because it was a very frustrating experience. And so if we can open the gates and help make it a positive experience, because I wanted to. I signed up for that sewing course. There were other options, but I was like, how cool would it be to make this or that? And I hated it. So, and now here I am. It's my profession. So if we can help people experience the good, because clearly they're interested, they're coming because they want to learn, let's help that be a positive thing so that there's more,
That's it. And, at the end of the day, you want people to be excited to make their quilt, already be having that, what am I going to be making next? And, have them already with those wheels turning for them to be inspired by, the fabric that they see, or, having seen something that maybe they thought wasn't achievable yet, they're now ready to tackle. Because that's a big thing in terms of, making sure that people absolutely can feel inspired, but not necessarily intimidated when they're starting in quilting.
Because it is intimidating. Even for me now, I'd love to make some garments, and I'm like, I don't know about that. It's a very intimidating threshold. So for someone to hold your hand to any new thing, because and I would watch, there was a craftsy show that I purchased that came with a pattern, and the person who was running the show or whatever, they would just sew and open and their seams matched up. I'm like, that's not happening over here. How did you like slow it down? Help me. So I just think that's so cool.
Yeah, I've really tried to structure the course so that the elements aren't massive and overwhelming as well, because if you're going to be spending what little precious time a lot of us have on a hobby and in learning how to quilt when we've got such busy lives and kids happening and all the other things and family commitments and work commitments, that time has to be productive, and it has to be useful, and it has to be something that they're really excited and inspired to do. So I've tried to really make the video content and the workbook content really about doing, rather than spending hours and hours watching and having then spent all that time watching rather than making. So I've really been very intentional with how the units are structured, to be able to have people getting that beautiful end result, and also one that they're just so proud of at the end.
And you have a workbook. I just heard you mention that. So that's awesome.
Yeah, so each of the units, not only are there videos, there are also details that go together for that with the workbook. So everything's laid out. Everything, not only is there the visual element, but there's the written element, because we all have different ways that we learn.
You really are a great teacher. I love it. How did you record? Did you record on your phone? What was your setup like?
So that was probably initially my biggest hurdle as to how was I actually going to make this course and how was I going to do the video. Obviously, I'd done a lot of work with, reels and video content and that. So I actually invested in a course last year, Patchwork, which I know you know about.
Oh, yeah. Uh-huh.
And essentially sort of got myself set up with, I got a lighting kit, and it was kind of like each fortnight I was building on this whole video element, because I knew that that's where the most important elements of the course had to be. So in getting some and investigating some really good phone holders, so I've got some great phone gear to be able to record shots from my phone, and essentially I've done it on my iPhone.
Awesome. I love to hear that, because often people are so intimidated and they think, I need to hire a professional videographer or whatever. And I'm like, please don't. But I am curious, would you be able to share links to the things that you've bought to record with?
Yeah, because I actually get asked all the time on Instagram, because I've been sharing, because I share a lot of that content. People are like, where did I get that particular thing from? And the only obviously difference for me is I'm in Australia, so I generally will buy off Amazon.com in Australia for particular gear that I can't get locally or anything else. But yeah, definitely happy to, sometimes you just need the name of what the item is to be able to then go and search and that sort of thing. So, there are some things that I've had that have worked. I sent back an item because it actually didn't hold the weight of my phone.
Which one was that, out of curiosity?
It was an overhead, it's almost like an L-shaped phone holder. That looked really sturdy, but unfortunately my phone is quite big, so it actually just didn't hold the weight of the phone. So we had to come up with some other elements for that. So, but in saying that as well, I did have I've got some awesome help in terms of helping with the filming, because there were just areas that I actually couldn't film myself, or I couldn't get the use of like I've got the tripods and the lights and that. It actually didn't necessarily capture what I needed very specifically. So I had some amazing help from Eloise, and she helped me, with the filming in terms of, there were things that I knew that I did, and then there were other elements that I put together all the ideas and the run sheet for what we needed to film when we were together. And then she was great with that, and definitely in terms of helping with editing and that. So sometimes there are just things that are outside your skill set, and that's, as I know you know very well, that's where you get those people. And again, was just an area that I knew investing my money into was hopefully going to be, see a return.
Yeah. So who is Eloise? You mentioned the name. I'm like, wait, who is this?
Yeah, Eloise is, she's absolute magician. She has helped me with a lot of the content that I do here in the studio, and my two teenage girls generally will give me about 2 seconds before they're like, are we done? So I realised very quickly that I needed to get someone else to come and help me with some of the video content. So Eloise has come in to help me with that, and then she's really great at being able to edit things really quickly, and just her eye for content and knowing what I do, because I've been working with her for a little while now. She doesn't know anything about quilting, but she now has definitely sort of a bit more knowledge and that. But it's one of those cases, as with getting help in your VA, and just those deciding in your business who are the people who are going to help. It doesn't sometimes have to be things like Facebook ads. It actually might be another area, and thinking outside the square of like not putting your money into something else because there is going to be something else that will actually help move that needle.
So is she your virtual assistant, Eloise?
No, she is a content creator.
Really? And you just met her by living by you?
She was actually, when Reels first came out, she was actually doing coaching for Reels. So I met her from going and learning. She was teaching some workshops, and I went along, and she was like, for me, I had said I was not doing Reels when for about the first 6 months, and I didn't want to know about them. So I actually had to learn.
We all were like that.
Yeah.
Like, no,
so
this is gonna go. It's gotta go.
So I signed up to her course and her workshop to actually learn how to upload a reel, how to put music to it, and all that sort of thing. So, and we've been working together sort of since then, because I realised also at that point that she was a great member to have, helping me out.
You know what else is like my dream? To have some young college student who's very in with trends and technology, who happens to live next door to me, so she can come over every day and record content, post it for me, and then make a schedule for the month. You have this coming up, let's promote. That's my dream. I'm just going to throw it out in the universe so that maybe I'll have some kind of Eloise in my life.
Yeah, no, look, definitely the people, behind me this year, and especially last year, Xanthi and Eloise, they're the people who are, helping to make things happen for me in terms of, when I don't know things, they're the people who are, who are experts in their areas, and that's the difference in knowing sometimes there are things that I can do and that there are things that they can do in half the amount of time. And that was that, in terms of filming, that was where I knew my biggest roadblock was, and that's when I went, I can do it, and I've certainly done, I did plenty of it for the course and that sort of thing, but there were other areas, and I'm like, it's going to take me way too long and too many takes, and the sun's going to go down, and I'm not going to have enough light and all that sort of thing, where if I get someone in to help, I can actually make it better.
And I also have to touch on the fact that you just mentioned it in passing, but she taught a course in your area. You are a student, you're learning. Like, even you reaching out, can I have a coaching call? You are you're a teacher, but you're a learner. And the ones who really succeed are forever students, learning, trying new things. And I really admire that. So well done.
Thank you. It's definitely, this has been the biggest, the last 6 months in building this course, absolutely has been the scariest, biggest step I've taken in my business since I can remember. It's almost like those first day classroom jitters. You don't sleep the night before because you're so excited to meet that new class, and it's exactly how I felt also in my business. Whilst it's been absolutely challenging and there have been tears, I will not lie, and there have been days where I'm like, I actually can't work this out. Like, this just doesn't. How can I not put this together? And then now I'm looking at having doors ready to open, and I'm actually just. It's really nice to look back at the moment and go, wow, like, I can't actually believe, like I feel like I'm getting there.
I'm just so excited for you. So I'm curious, will doors be open all the time? Do you have open and close launch?
So for this launch, obviously it's my first one and also the first time I've offered this type of course on this type of platform. So I've chosen a doors open and doors close approach. Mm-hmm. It's definitely a course that I want to offer again later in the year. So that's potentially sort of where I'm headed with it. But I wanted to go through that experience of learning how to do all those open emails and actually learning how to do that side of it as well. So that's where a lot of the other challenges have come up, and a lot of the other learnings in actually how to launch a product and do that. So yeah, so doors are open for 5 days only for this, what will be my founding student round, which I'm really excited about because I've actually had some testers who I've worked with over the last 6 months. So they've been through the course. They've been with me since the beginning, and I've been using their feedback and working with them. One of whom had never quilted ever.
Perfect.
So, actually seeing, her first quilt, and that it's amazing, like the messages that you get, from people when they're making things, that's what lights me up, just that success, and their, this is the quilt that I've made. That's the, that's what we do it for.
I love it. Which I'm going to throw this out. This is like my secret weapon, if I haven't mentioned it already. The book Launch by Jeff Walker. He has a new version that just came out. Read it. Obviously not for this launch. It's a bit close, but you're going to launch later this year. I'm going to say I love him, or not in that way, but I read the book years ago because I want to say Bonnie Christine or someone recommended it, and I didn't finish it because it just felt a bit fluffy. I was like, I need action items. This is like, I don't need to hear any more stories about success of how this worked. I need to know what to do. But then I hired a mentor last year, and she was like, read that book, do everything it says, step by step. And my launch quadrupled. Like it was crazy. So I would read that book and implement it. And I feel like I'm sharing my secret weapon with the world, but everyone deserves to know about it. So
no, I'm definitely excited to see, this, obviously a lot of people who are already in my audience, they've already made that their first quilt, or they're a couple of quilts down the road. So this has also been growing that newer side of my audience, which I think I already have really catered to beforehand, because most of my patterns I always, I'm very much love writing to that beginner quilter, because a lot of my patterns aren't necessarily rocket science, but what I have in that teaching element is in the words in those instructions, and helping people to work through a pattern maybe that they haven't felt confident doing, definitely getting them sort of started on their adventures in quilting, and having them love it and enjoy it. So yeah, I'm really excited to see how this goes. I'm obviously extremely nervous
right.
as well, but also just more excited that I've had reaching new people, and the response already is starting to be really, really positive. So a whole new element to what I offer. So yeah,
very cool. Well, and even I don't know, on my 10th quilt, there's always things that it's just like a sport or anything else. I mean, my husband's like, it's all about the fundamentals. His favorite teams are the ones who focus on the fundamentals. Same with quilting. You go back to the fundamentals. Even now, I was with a friend making a binding, and she's like, I can see you struggling with that a bit. Let me show you this. And she showed me a tip. You never stop learning. It always goes back to the fundamentals. So no matter how experienced you are, there's always something you can learn about the fundamentals. So
I've definitely, New Quilt on the Block is definitely designed, for beginners, for that person looking to make their first quilt. But I have had messages already in DMs, like I've already made a couple of quilts, but I don't feel like I had the right teachings in terms, or I've pieced it all together from YouTube. Do you think that this course would still be suitable? And I've answered absolutely, because focusing on learning those skills, focusing on learning the actual correct equipment that you need, not just, these are all the tools and you need needles and whatever else, actually going through and describing what they are and what they do and why they're different to other areas of sewing. So that's definitely something that I've come across as I've begun to promote the course, that, people are sort of keen to learn that element and those skills and techniques, maybe who haven't been shown, pinning and how to pin, as opposed to just, slapping it together and, hoping for the best. So,
well, even now I'm like, what is the correct way to pin? Maybe I need to take this course. But there's more that's coming up this year. So, and we just have a couple minutes left, but let's hear what else is happening. It's been a lot happening.
Well, big year, definitely. I've got coming out in March is my third book. So I'm very, very excited to get this third book out. It's been it's taken a little bit of time to get out there, but I'm definitely hoping that it's going to be well received. It's quite it's not a different book to what I've written beforehand, but it's definitely got a little bit of a plot twist in that this is not just a quilting book, it's actually also a crochet book. So if anyone's been following me on Instagram, they kind of possibly already know that I love crochet. I've always done it. I've done it since I was a child, and I think I learnt to crochet long before I learnt to quilt. So it's funny how it's come completely full circle in that was actually the first craft that I learnt. And now I've been able to put together crochet and quilt in one book.
That's so cool. I did not know that. When I saw the title of the book, I was like, huh? Crochet? So I didn't know that. And side note, I love the way you word things. It's very Australian/British. You said a little bit of a plot twist. I love that. I might have to use that phrase sometime. And you also mentioned fortnight. In America, we do not use that term. I know now because I lived in England, it means 2 weeks.
Means 2 weeks, yep.
But it's not a common phrase. And so my kids play the game Fortnite. When you said Fortnite, I'm like, are you playing the game Fortnite? So I love the little cultural things, but
yeah. And when I've been in the US previously, there are definitely things that you learn, and people will look at you and you're like, oh, they don't know what I've just said, or they don't know what I mean. And definitely sort of that bridge. And in terms of writing as well, those are things that I have to actually write all my. I misspell according to
color,
everything. Yeah. So color and all those sorts of words I actually write, as American English rather than my Australian English. And
for shame! I feel like you should be able to keep your culture in there, but really, it's definitely a book about taking those two crafts. You can be a beginner in either craft. Each of the patterns, and this is where that plot twist comes in, every pattern is identical. So each pattern you can either make it as a crochet blanket or a crochet project, or you can actually make the identical item as a quilt. That is so cool. So did you have this idea, or did the publisher approach you with that?
No, so what happened was would have been 2021 I started. It was actually sort of a bit of an experiment where I took what is my Aurora quilt pattern, and I was, because it's half square triangles, and I know you love half square triangles. I kept looking at that pattern, and I was into crochet quite heavily at the time, and I'm like, I really think I can make this quilt pattern into a crochet blanket. And it kind of just took legs from there, because I had not actually been doing crochet in terms of tied with a ribbon. It wasn't something I was doing professionally. It was just my break time at night time and relaxing from spending all day quilting. So it was never intended as something I thought would come, in terms of eventually being a book or anything like that. But essentially, I've been working on turning those quilt pattern designs into crochet blankets. And whilst that's definitely sort of not a new idea, obviously there's plenty of that sort of thing around.
I didn't know that, actually.
Originally the idea for the book came up, and I said, I actually don't want to write that, but I'd love to write this idea, and that's actually the idea that we've gone through with the actual book. So because originally book was going to be more focused on crochet, and I sort of said, look, that's most of my audience are here for the quilting. That's what I've built my audience off. That's what I love to teach. And but what I have learned is that I really do love both those elements, and one of them is where I started as a child, and then being able to now sort of teach that. I really sort of never thought I would teach that, and but definitely so quilted crochet came about. And I was really, at the time, I was at this is what I want to do for the book. And I was also, this is what I want to do, but I was happy if not to write it as well. So it was kind of a deal breaker, really, because it was either I was going to do that or I wasn't actually keen at that stage. That was what lit me up to write another book. Rather than, I wasn't in the headspace to come up with anything that sort of someone was putting on me, because I knew that when you write a book, you have to be passionate about it from go to end. It just
turns out this is true.
It's such a big part of your life for so long, and just and content and the element. And if you're not loving writing that, then you're spending a lot of time probably wishing you hadn't signed up in the first place.
It's true. Isn't that true with anything in life? Any kind of business or anything, you have to really love it.
Yeah, and I've learned that along the way. With it being my third book, I knew what I wanted it to look like, and just at that point where I have plenty of other things to go on with. If that wasn't the opportunity, that was the right one for me. So, but yes, so. I'm thankful now that we're nearly at that stage where we're about to launch. It's going to go out into the world, and looking forward to sharing that.
Very cool. I also really love that you were like, well, there's plenty of books that are out there like that already. This brings up the point that we are oversaturated in what we're looking at. So a lot of people would be like, oh, there's already beginning quilt courses or whatever it is that your passion is. We feel like that market's oversaturated. But here you mentioned to me, there's so many books with the quilt and crochet. I've never heard of it at all. There will always be more people who haven't seen what you want to offer than there are people who have seen it. There's always going to be an audience for what you want to give. So that's a big thing to think about.
Yeah, I mean, the publisher definitely, when I brought that, because originally, as I said, the concept was for just it being crochet. When I added in that element of the quilt part of it, they initially were like, oh, this, how are we going to put that together in one book? And whilst there's plenty of it on the internet, I don't know that there had been a lot of it specifically within the pages of a book. And so this whole sort of original concept was like, oh, I don't know if this is going to fly. This is really hard to sell. Which audience do we sell it? Do we sell it to the crochet side? Do we sell it to quilting stores? And honestly, I had an email back within 24 hours of the board having gone, we absolutely have love this idea, and that cross mix of the two was really welcomed. So. I think at the time it was definitely a different idea to put it in the pages of a book.
Yeah, I'll be curious. I would love to hear from you down the road how that's going and who it's selling more to, the crochet, the quilting. I'm very curious about that.
Yeah, and definitely also, that whole element, again, leaning into, my love for teaching, and all the projects are beginner projects. I didn't want to sort of put out there anything that was going to put off, that beginner element and putting off anyone who didn't know how to do one or the other, because you can literally pick up the book and you could just make the quilt projects out of it, or you could just make the crochet projects out of it, but also feel confident enough to tackle both.
Well, okay, I've got to wrap it up. I have another meeting coming up, but is there anything before we go that you want to share or touch on?
Well, I'm really looking forward to New Quilt on the Block with doors opening on February 3rd. So I'm really excited, and I've definitely looking forward to people coming along, checking out the details for that if they have listened and thought that they've loved that, and definitely sort of watching along as on Instagram. I love sort of checking out and chatting to people on Instagram. I spend probably way too much time over there, but I love connecting with people and people making, my patterns, and very much, looking forward to those things, as well as, I've got a lot of travelling on the books this year. So,
Really?
I'm very much looking forward to. I've got so far I've got 4 interstate workshops and trunk show and principal speaking events that I'm headed over to. So I'm so excited for 2023.
Are you coming to Quilt Market in the fall by chance?
Is that for Houston? Probably not, because I'm already at
Okay.
another speaking engagement. So, but yeah, look, I'm really hoping to get back to the US. I'm hoping next year. So 2024, QuiltCon is absolutely on my bucket list. It's also
Yes.
a big goal of mine to get over to QuiltCon.
Yes, I shall be there in 2024. Wait, yeah, okay, not 2023, but 2024. So,
All right. Well, we'll have to chat together and make sure that we're
I
sorted.
know.
Yeah.
okay, I'm going to put in the show notes, be quilterscandy.com/92. There, what should I share? What will be there? Will it be, people can't sign up yet, but is there a wait list?
There's absolutely a wait list. So, and once you pop your name on that wait list, you'll also get my quilters terms and maths cheat sheet as well. So you get yourself a little
Nice.
PDF sheet, a couple of pages of that, and that absolutely will help you with all your quilting terms and your quilting maths, and that will lead you into knowing when doors open. And seeing the course through that. So I'll send you, those details. Definitely would love to have that. And if people are following along on Instagram, then they'll see not only the information for that, but also coming up for my book, Quilt It, Crochet It. And there's definitely, and of course you can always go to my website and sign up there for my newsletter as well. So you'll always be in the loop on all the Tied with the Ribbon news.
Yes. Well, I kind of want to opt in to get that math. Okay, this is one other thing before we go. Why is there an S at the end of maths?
Because in Australia we say maths.
That's just, in England does it too. The first time I heard it, I'm like, why are they making that plural?
Yeah, it's just maths is the subject here. It's always just
Maths.
always been maths. Yeah.
So when you hear people say math, are you like,
I know they're
finish
American.
at the S? Okay. It's so weird, these little things. I'm like, what happened there? But anyhow.
Yeah.
Well, it was so fun catching up. This went longer than I would have loved to keep going. You're just so fun to chat with. I love chatting business, and you're just very pleasant. So thank you.
Thanks, Liz. You've been such a great, inspiration to me, and you and I have been friends for a long time now in knowing what we both get up to, and that's always been so great, and really supportive of what I do. So I really appreciate that you've always got time for me, and definitely looking forward to seeing what comes of this year.
Yeah. And let me know if you read that launch book too. I'd love to chat about it with you.
Definitely going to get that one.
All right. Well, good luck with the launch. Thank you again for being here.
Thanks, Liz.
Jemima, thank you so much for being on the podcast. As always, it was a pleasure to chat with you. And I hope the listeners could tell how much I loved just diving deep and chatting business and hearing what's coming up for your business. It's such exciting things. Not that it's like my jurisdiction to be proud, but I'm really proud of all that you've done. It's been so awesome to see. So thank you for being on the podcast. And if you don't already, go and follow Jemima, Tied with a Ribbon, and keep an eye out for her course. She is definitely one talented quilter. And you heard even me. I'm like, I think I could learn quite a bit from this. So go check that out. And again, thank you so much for being here, Jemima. Next week, I have a unique guest on the show, and it's unique in the fact of how we met each other. So you'll hear how we met. She approached me at a book signing, and I was like, oh, you have this shop, you should be on the podcast. And she is. In fact, it was a lovely time chatting with her. I cannot wait to introduce you to Laura of Global Fiber Shop. She just brings a really unique perspective for those of you listeners who are thinking of opening an online fabric shop. And she's been very successful. I cannot wait to introduce you to Laura next week of Global Fiber Shop. Until then, have a wonderful week, and we will see you back here next Friday on the Craft to Career podcast.